So when I was around 5 or 6, I went to a Catholic school called St. Vivian, and it was a mostly white school, and I got called many names because I was the only black kid there. There's one incident where I wanted to participate in a game where they were playing characters or something, and there's a particular character that I wanted to be, and one of the girls said I couldn't be that character because I was black, and being 5, that kind of shook my world up.
My name is Daniel Saw. I am a first-generation Korean American, and I am here to share some of my experiences and struggles of being a person of color in the United States. Like many first-generation children of immigrants in the United States, I am what's also called a third culture kid, an individual who was raised in a culture other than their parents. Because of this, I had some difficulties really developing a sort of cultural identity because of feeling ostracized by both my American and Korean peers. The fact that I was born and raised in the United States and the fact that English was my primary language were often not really taken into consideration or were often disregarded by many of my American peers. There was one time where I got picked on and felt like I didn't really belong among some of my friends just because my mother packed me a different lunch than everyone else. On the other hand, there were times where I often felt the same way amongst many of my Korean peers. Just because my Korean wasn't perfect or I hadn't visited Korea in some times often made me feel ostracized by many of them.
I'm half black and half white. That means I'm not as black as some, but I'm definitely not white. I can remember the first time that someone said something to me that really stung me was in middle school. I come from a military family, so I've been moved around to schools a couple of times. The first time I had introduced myself to my new class, I had one kid ask me why I didn't have an accent. Now, I understand that he's in middle school and, they don't really know better, but it still kind of struck me that even though I may not have looked, it struck me as odd because they expected me to talk differently just because I looked different.
My name's Jose. I moved to the United States from Peru at the age of 7. I was at a party thrown by a friend of mine who was a new German exchange student at our school. At the party, I was having a lot of fun with my friends until it came nighttime when everyone had left and I had to wait for my ride. These 2 white boys who lived at the house walked over to me. One asked me, "Where are you from?" So I replied by saying that I'm from Peru. The other boy said, "Peru?" The first guy turned to his friend and said, "Yeah, they're a new breed of illegals, I've heard." I felt bad about myself and frustrated because I couldn't stand up to them. I didn't know how to react initially, so I just sat there in silence while they laughed at me. Eventually, my mother came to get me, and when I stepped in the car, she asked me how the party was, and I tell her everything was fine. I had kept this to myself because I didn't want to make a big deal out of it.
And then there was another time where I got bullied so bad because, I was called the N-word, I was called a porch monkey, I was called, any slur that you can think of. And it got so bad that I went to school with a hoodie on and I had my arms covered up, my legs covered up. I went in leggings, and my grandma was picking me up from school, and she asked me why I was covered head to toe in the middle of summer. And I said it's because I was ashamed that I was a different color. Of course, she told me they were jealous and all that, but at the time, dealing with that negativity every day, it was hard to take a positive comment, I suppose.
There was one time where one of my cousins was making a dish and I didn't know what it was, and he explained to me that it was this Korean dish called budae-jjigae, which was a very culturally specific dish to post-war Korea, and it was just something that my parents never really made for me, and so he had sarcastically asked, "Are you really Korean?" just because I didn't know what budae-jjigae was, and so it made me feel like I was less Korean than him, even though like we were first cousins, just because I didn't know what this dish was. And from what I've been told, this experience and feeling of not really belonging in either culture is common amongst other third culture kids.
Next thing I can remember was also in the same elementary school. In art class, we were supposed to be doing self-portraits. I was one of 2 non-white children in that entire class, and I remember looking around at everyone else's drawings, and they all looked a lot different than mine. I was having trouble doing my self-portrait, so I asked the teacher for help, and she had trouble teaching me because she said she had never had a student that looked like me before. So that made me feel a little bit isolated, and I felt like I was being excluded almost.
One time I was at my coworker's house. We were chilling, drinking, whatever, playing video games, when all of a sudden this like big group of all white dudes just come in, and I know they're all Trump supporters, and one of them was wearing like a Navy uniform. I don't know why. It was like 30 degrees outside. He walks in the house with a Navy uniform. So we're just chilling, and it's just me and my brother. We're the only 2 brown people. So at that time, I'm just thinking like, yo, anybody at any moment could pull out a weapon and just kill me and my brother at any moment. Because it's like Trump supporters, build that wall, all that stuff. So I'm just thinking, yo, if something were to happen, there's no way we could defend ourselves. And it was just like a weird moment for me.
That school in general was just a very toxic place for somebody who wasn't white. Even the teachers just kind of sat around and they watched the bullying. They watched how I had to fight with these kids, and they didn't really care. They were just like, well, like, that's part of learning, like, that's what happens. So racism in that school was just a norm for them. And yeah, it was a really difficult time for my life, and that's why I've been very closed off since then. So
Probably the most impactful one was in high school. I don't really remember what all led up to it, but I was somewhere and I remember someone saying to me, you're really pretty for a black girl. And it just kind of, it didn't sit right with me that just because I wasn't white, that I wasn't pretty, or that because I was black, because I was lighter skinned, that I was somehow more pretty than a darker skinned girl. Or the implication that because I'm black, I can't be pretty. I know none of it's like life threatening or anything, but it still hurts nonetheless.